I've always had kind of a passion for STEM. I always really enjoyed like calculus, chemistry, physics. So I was looking for something that kind of would encapsulate all of that. And I found out that essentially engineering like encapsulated everything I wanted to do. And it also opened up so many doors to different jobs. For me, what always worked is just to do the next right thing. What can you do that gets you one step forward? Thinking about too long in the future, how am I going to get an A in this class? How am I going to get in the industry that I want, the position that I want? Because that's a lot more achievable. And ultimately, it's those little steps that add up to getting you to where you want to be.
This is EngineeringPro, and today we're thrilled to have Madison Smith on the podcast to discuss her experiences getting into mechanical engineering and how she got to where she is today. Madison is a mechanical engineering graduate from BC, Canada, currently working as a technical advisor in building technology and energy solutions. Her journey into social media began during a work-study position at her university, where she discovered her passion for content creation. She launched her own channels to showcase the dynamic side of mechanical engineering and highlight how exciting and impactful the industry can be. So, Madison, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
We've got quite a few questions today. I'll jump straight into the first one with you. What was it that inspired you to study mechanical engineering? Was it family or friends or kind of interest from school or hobbies?
Yeah. What inspired me really is I've always had kind of a passion for STEM. Ever since I was little, I always loved those at the book fair where you could go and get those little kits. I always didn't care about the book. I cared about the little science kit that came with it. So from a young age, I was always very kind of STEM driven, but I wasn't sure about engineering. I honestly didn't know that much about it until my upper years of high school. I always really enjoyed like calculus, chemistry, physics. So I was looking for something that kind of would encapsulate all of that. And I didn't have like a specific avenue that I wanted to go down. And when I found out about engineering, there was actually kind of an open house where they invited some students from my high school to go to for engineering. And I was like, I'll go to this and learn about what this is. And I found out that essentially engineering like encapsulated everything I wanted to do. And it also opened up so many doors to different jobs. And as somebody who was 18, not knowing what I wanted to do with my life, I feel like engineering was just a really good path to go down and kind of figure yourself out. So yeah, that's kind of how I chose engineering.
Oh, brilliant. Cool. Thank you. So once you kind of decided, engineering was definitely the way that you wanted to go, or certainly something that you wanted to explore from where you were, I suppose the next step then was kind of deciding where to go. So what was the process like for choosing where you'd study? What was the effect? What was the factors that affected that decision?
Yeah, so I definitely knew I wanted to stay within Canada, but I wasn't sure where in Canada. I applied to universities actually all across Canada because I wasn't sure. And then ultimately, I decided to stay within BC, which is where I grew up on the West Coast. And the reason for that is because I love the mountains, I love the nature, and also considering trips back home for Christmas and Thanksgiving, I wanted to be not too far away. So I ended up going about an hour flight away from where I lived. And I also wanted to go to a reputable university that had, it was reputable for engineering specifically, but I didn't want to go to a super big campus because I was from a pretty small town, actually Salt Spring Island, which is a little small island with a high school of 400 people. So I liked the more intimate learning environment. And UBC Okanagan is actually kind of a campus off of UBC. So you get the big UBC support of a large university, but you have the option to do that smaller campus. So that's ultimately kind of how I decided that that would be a good spot for me. And many people that I knew went to UBCO and had kind of raving reviews, as well as like doctors who had gone and done work there too. So kind of a mix of all that decided that UBCO would be a good fit for me. And it worked out really well. So I was happy that I went there.
Absolutely. And then staying relatively close to home as well. You don't have the stress trap. So it's quite lucky in effect that you had that facility that was relatively close.
Yeah, and another reason too, UBCO has a skiing nearby, and I didn't know how to like snowboard or ski, and that was one of the things I wanted to do. So that was also a draw to the university, was like kind of life outside of academics as well.
Oh, brilliant. So while you were there, obviously we'll talk about it in a little more detail, but you did work with an internship as well as study. So how did you find the balance between sort of study and an internship and kind of life generally in order to graduate?
Yeah, I mean, balancing everything with engineering can always be a challenge, especially in your first year when you're trying to adjust to new city, new people, studying, and kind of having to be self directed the whole time. So it was definitely challenging at first, but eventually you kind of find your way. I feel like second semester and first year. But for internships, I actually got my first internship because I was involved with clubs at my school, and some of the faculty I worked pretty closely with, and they had someone reach out looking for someone to work for them for the summer. And because I was close with the faculty, they're like, "Hey, do you want this job?" And I was like, "Sure." And so that was how I got my first internship. So I think that shows the importance of connection and also being at a small campus. Like you have those connections with faculty. But balancing internships for us are like typically when you're off school, so you'll be doing an internship full time. There is like research positions where people do kind of part time research as well as studying, which I think could be a lot more challenging. But I found internships actually much easier than school. I did an internship this summer before my last year. So that's actually the company that I ended up going with. So I got a job offer kind of after that internship where they said the internship, which is a good tip for a lot of students as well. The internships often are somewhat of an interview. So if they like you, there's a much greater chance that you'll get a full-time offer with that company. So again, super important to do internships. But yeah, that's how I ended up getting my full-time job was that last internship. Then I did 2 months of studying, but I was already knowing that I was going to start this position in July. So I love being part of internships. I was getting paid and it was easier. And I think it brought a lot more kind of meaning to the stuff you were studying. We learn all this stuff on paper. When you get to the real world, things look just so different. Like it ties in, but not quite. And I find after you do an internship, coming back, you're much more interested in the stuff you're studying because you understand like the real purpose behind it, not just like all these equations. Why am I solving them? For what reason?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's the academic work is obviously important. It gets you started. It gets the information that you need, but it also puts you, and it did for me as well. It was very much putting in a position where you could reach out and start networking, which is a huge part, I think, of any industry.
Yeah, yeah. I always tell students is the biggest thing you can do in undergrad. Like honestly, part of it is networking because that's where you're going to find out about the jobs. Like I think academics are super important, but of course, try to prioritize being a part of clubs, research, getting to know your faculty because ultimately that's how you're going to get those jobs afterwards. And it makes it a lot harder if you don't do that in undergrad and all of a sudden start doing that when you graduate because you have so many resources at university that you won't have when you graduate. So take advantage of that. Like that's what you're paying for. So yeah, I found it super valuable.
It kind of ties into my next question, but you've kind of answered this quite a bit in that was it quite open? Were you kind of still learning where you could go and what you wanted to do? Or did you have a plan after university and where the places that you wanted to kind of target as you'd started? Was there a kind of a point, I suppose, where you made that choice?
Yeah, I think it's kind of hard, especially with mechanical, because one of its benefits is it's so versatile, but also can be a negative because it doesn't put you directly into some sort of job. Like there's so many different areas, and I kind of love a lot of different things. So trying to pick one was pretty challenging. I was interested in biomedical. My mechanical engineering degree was actually specialized in biomedical. So I was very interested in that avenue, but I also like aerospace and I kind of like business in general too. I was involved with a lot of clubs and kind of realized my passion for business and entrepreneurship. So I was trying to find something that could encapsulate all of those, and I wasn't sure exactly what role that would be. The beauty of internships is because just because it's an industry you've never heard of doesn't mean it won't be a great fit for you because a lot of the time there's these industries that are promoted to us like aerospace, biomedical, but mechanical and engineering in general is just so broad that there's such niche jobs within that. um, yeah, so I wasn't sure exactly what path that I wanted to go down until I did the internships, honestly. And ultimately, the reason I chose building solutions is because it is so broad. We work with every kind of customer, every kind of industry. So my itch for wanting to be involved with everything kind of got hit by working on building solutions. So
Oh,
yeah.
cool. So in starting that work, then obviously it's worked out really well, and it was a good thing that you took an internship and somewhere that resonated. So in that respect, just kind of going into a bit more detail of what the experience has been like so far. How have the skills that you learned during study translated into the job? Did you need to learn anything new, perhaps during the internship or when you started? And what was kind of the reality of actually going into the industry like against your expectations while you were studying and doing the internship?
Hmm. Yeah, of course. There's definitely a lot of the technical knowledge that will transfer. So for us, it's like fluids, heat transfer, and project management. There's a lot of soft skills that I didn't kind of assume would be a huge part of the job, but writing, as much as engineers kind of, we just want to do math, we don't want to do writing, it is a huge part of a lot of engineers' jobs. Ultimately, if you do all this work, it has to be reported somewhere, and you're the ones writing the reports. So it was a surprise to me how much writing I would be doing, and also communication because you're working on teams. Like engineering is not done alone. So those group projects that we all kind of dread in university were ultimately super helpful because you get to the workplace and you have all kinds of personalities, all kinds of people. We're dealing with our customers that are also their own teams. So things get kind of complex in that regard. So communication skills that you develop in those group projects and in those internships, in those clubs that you're part of, become super helpful later on, especially like mitigating kind of conflict resolution skills. Interesting how soft skills in a very technical seeming degree becomes kind of the most valuable skill because it's easy to teach someone technical skills and it's a lot harder to teach the soft skills. So companies are looking for the soft skills part because they're like, we can teach you everything else. Um, and yeah, I would say technical side, I definitely have learned a lot. It's hard translating all that stuff that we learned like in energy systems into what a real system looks like in a building and trying to identify what each piece, what part they play and what that means for the customer, what that means for the building. So there's a lot of that I'm kind of in currently in trying to figure out right now. So yeah, lots of learning to do. I think it's probably going to be at least a couple years before I truly feel like I understand my job.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's something that we highlight quite a lot when we're talking in our other content as well. Is that the hard skills obviously you can learn, but soft skills and transferable skills are the things that kind of really help carry a career. So what we'll
Mhm.
do now is just kind of look a bit more broadly from the country and also kind of a bit of demographics as well. What does the engineering or the mechanical engineering industry look like in Canada? What does the industry look like for people who are also kind of maybe going through graduation and stuff as well? What does that kind of sector look like?
So right now, I mean, finding a job can be a challenge. I think that's kind of the economic state right now of just the world in general. But the people who did find jobs right away, I found were people who did internships with companies that were wanting to hire them on. If you want to set yourself up to have a job afterwards, it's do internships and try and keep good connections and relations with that company. Uh, but in Canada generally, there's definitely opportunity for mechanical engineering. I mean, mechanical engineering is in absolutely everything. So there's lots of opportunity there. Depending on what sector you want to go into, though, there can be some challenges geographically. So, for example, I'm in BC. I notice a lot of the internships were catered towards civil engineering students. So, trying to find a mechanical specific can be a bit more challenging, and you might have to move to a bigger city or you might go somewhere else in Canada. Ontario is known for being pretty good for mechanical jobs because a lot of our manufacturing's done there. There's a nuclear power plant there. So it depends kind of geographically where you are. Out here on the coast, marine engineering tends to be an avenue people go down, or the military. So there's definitely sectors within mechanical. But if you have one that you specifically want to go for, you might have to move. Unless you're in something like mine, building technology. Buildings are everywhere. So that's one where you can kind of be everywhere in Canada.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, I suppose the opportunity again, going back to soft skills, transferable skills, and the learned information is that for people who aren't necessarily 100% sure of where they want to go, the opportunities are quite broad. Like you say, that you can start somewhere, and then as you work and identify some of the skills that you particularly enjoy, you can kind of hone down, and that starts the specialization process, I suppose, as part of someone's career.
Yeah. Yeah. And some people with engineering, they might go a completely different avenue afterwards, which is another reason I think it's a great degree is you can go into finance. You can go, a few of my friends have started their own businesses. So there's a lot of different ways you can go where just that knowledge base in mechanical engineering and problem solving and being able to like understand and complex problems and run projects can transfer to a lot of different areas in your life. So definitely lots of opportunity.
Absolutely brilliant. And then my next question is, as a female graduate, what does the industry look like in terms of opportunities for women in a traditionally male-dominated industry or an assumed male-dominated industry?
Yeah, I think the opportunities are great. A lot of companies have really understood the need for women to be in those industries. So there's a lot of initiatives supporting women. Most companies that I know have women support groups as well within the company. My company does as well. For example, next week I'm actually going to a women's conference in Chicago to meet a bunch of my women coworkers from across North America. So there's definitely companies understand that gap and are putting in what's necessary to have women be supported. The men, of course, have been actually super supportive. Like they're very supportive. They also themselves understand the need for women's perspective in these rooms. But yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I'm really excited to see where the future goes with more women coming into STEM. I know Canada has this goal of like 20 or 30 by 2030. So they're really pushing women going into these industries. And yeah, I've had multiple women mentors. At two of my jobs, actually, my bosses were women. So there's definitely women coming into leadership positions as well. We think it just needs a little bit more time for the industries. But yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel that it's one of those things that businesses, and this is across all
Yeah.
industries and sectors everywhere, I think, that these DEI policies and this kind of shift towards these better policies and getting these voices heard, do you feel like women's voices are being heard in the industry and changes are coming from there now? Is it, is it being led a bit more from a women's perspective as opposed to the traditional board of CEOs who are trying to decide on people's behalf?
Yeah, yeah, I think it definitely is. There's definitely a big focus. At least most companies I've worked for, they'll always have a sector or someone to go to within the office as well. So any complaints that women may have or opinions they may have are definitely voiced and noted. And I think for the sustainability of a lot of businesses as well, like the women are a huge part of the workforce. So it's really important that these traditionally male dominated businesses have been, they've been created around their workforce, which have been traditionally men. So now that a bunch of women are coming in, it's really important for them to know how to shift their company so it can support and keep their workers happy, keep their workers there, so that their businesses can ultimately succeed. So I definitely think they're taking note of that for the benefit of the business as well, because it's really important to have women there so that they can have a sustainable business.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's about retention as well, isn't it? It's
Yeah, for sure.
as we've mentioned, there are opportunities, but there are challenges. I think in certain sectors, there's still a very high demand for some of these skills, and these businesses that are recognizing that are just widening the pool to the widest possible demographics they can, and really kind of setting themselves apart for the most potential candidates themselves. So it works from their side as well, I think.
Yeah, I really appreciate the EDI. It can be because there's a lot of things that kind of go unsaid. I think for women, what I always give advice to women in engineering is find a community, find other women in engineering, because often if you talk to other women, they are experiencing the same thing. So I think that's really important because that's kind of what ultimately leads to change. If nobody's talking, then no change is being done. So having those initiatives in place to go talk and making sure it's a priority allows those changes to actually happen. Yeah, so I'm very excited for the future because I think a lot of good changes are happening now. And in whatever the next 10, 20 years, I think we'll really see the results.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It's really exciting to see those changes in action now across industries. Globally as well. It's not just a Canadian thing. It's not just American. It's not just Europe. It's global, which is fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
So, just coming back to your career again, and thinking about what you're doing at the moment. What are your kind of next steps in your mind now? You're kind of settling into the role. What's your next 5 years look like?
Yeah, so I feel like a lot is going to change in the next 5 years. I'm actually going to be going to a graduate training program in the States in January. So I'm going to be there for about 6 months because we need additional training because we don't learn enough about HVAC and building systems within our engineering studies, my 5 years of studies. Still got to study a little bit more. So that's going to be really exciting and also kind of learn about the real world application of how all that technical knowledge goes into my job and my role. And then after that, I'm going to be kind of jumping in deep. And actually, right now, I'm kind of almost in an internship phase before I do this program. So I'm kind of shadowing a lot of my other coworkers and seeing what their roles look like. But ultimately, when I come back, my role is partly engineering, partly business. So I also, in some ways, get a lot of flexibility with my job, and we get to be creative in how we want to approach our role. I feel like so much is going to change. I've had such a crazy 2024, like graduating, I went and traveled the world, and then now I'm starting a job in a new city. So I think also kind of grounding myself a little bit more. I don't really have a super strong community here yet because I've only been here for a couple months. So I've been going to lots of networking events to try and meet other STEM focused, business focused people, which luckily there's a lot of that in Vancouver. So I think the next 5 years is going to be a lot of learning. I always say I'm in like my sponge phase. So it's just like my stage of absorbing as much information as possible. And then I'm hoping to kind of move into a state where I'm a little bit more comfortable, and then potentially with new hires also take on some mentorship roles.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, the technology moves so quickly as well, and I suppose in 5 years' time, especially this early on, it could all change, quite significantly as you're learning and developing and training year on year.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always new trends coming in. Building technology is kind of constantly evolving. The big one right now is AI solutions. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of impacts our industry as well. There's definitely been a lot of AI tools used and are going to continue to be used to optimize functionality of buildings. A lot of big sustainability goals for everyone. So trying to use AI to meet those sustainability goals. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that kind of ultimately works and what AI can do, because I think we're just in the early stages right now of seeing what it's capable of.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's something I think AI in sustainability actually is a topic that we've not covered very often. So we might be dropping you an email at some point to get you back
Yeah,
on, because that kind of sphere is huge, and there's so much to talk about.
yeah, definitely.
So our next question then, just a kind of a bit of a soundbite, something that a key takeaway really. What three things do you wish you'd known about before you started your career?
Yeah. Number one would definitely be the power of networking. It's super important in your undergraduate degree, not only to focus on your academics, but to ensure that you're networking, being part of clubs, internships, talking with your faculty, because ultimately that is how you're going to end up getting jobs. So it's really important, just as much as focusing on your academics, is to make time for those extracurriculars. I can't emphasize that enough. And second would be when you're an engineering student, it can be really challenging to know where you want to go with your career or with your academics, what you need to do to excel because you have so much on your plate at once. For me, what always worked is just to do the next right thing. What can you do that gets you one step forward? Thinking about too long in the future, how am I going to get an A in this class? How am I going to get in the industry that I want, the position that I want? What is the next right thing that can get you towards that goal? Because that's a lot more achievable. And ultimately, it's those little steps that add up to getting you to where you want to be. And lastly is failure. Embrace failure. As engineers, we know that all technologies come from a sequence of test and fail, test and fail, test and succeed, and that's how we develop these awesome technologies. So we should use that same kind of idea in our personal life. Try, 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 and as you fail, you'll get closer and closer to ultimately your goals and your career and the things you want to achieve. So those are the three things that I would want to hear when I was a student.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those three things apply certainly for very specifically to what we're talking about today, but just broad life advice, I think. I think it's just really good
Yeah,
advice for success in general.
exactly.
So just talking a little bit now for your kind of your other side of life, really, and how you kind of got into the social media side of things. What inspired you to share your journey on TikTok and Instagram?
Yeah. So as was mentioned in the intro, I ultimately did a work study position with my university where we were going to share what it looks like to be an engineering student. And so that's kind of originally how I got started making content. I always liked making content when I was younger. Whenever there was an opportunity in school to make a video instead of doing a presentation, I was making the video. So we always loved making videos as kids. So I thought it would be kind of a fun way to also share, my love for engineering and connect with other students. And when I was doing that position, I kind of realized that the gap in support for women online and the need that there is for it, because a lot of young women are reaching out being like, wow, like I didn't know engineering could be all of this, because it's often portrayed in a very kind of male lens, which doesn't interest as many women. And I'm like, no, it can be so much more beautiful and so much more creative and kind of a feminine take on what mechanical engineering means. And so after that, I kind of decided that it would be fun to start my own channels and just see where it would go, and ideally get to connect with some other really cool people, other engineers, inspiring young girls that want to go into engineering, and give them advice that I kind of wish I had. I didn't know any women engineers, never mind any engineers actually in general in my personal life when I was growing up. So I think the power that we have with the internet to be connected, why not take advantage of that? And if something good can come from it, then great, yeah. So that's kind of ultimately why I decided doing it. And I had a goal for myself as well. Like being on the internet can really be putting yourself out there. You have to be open to criticism. You have to be open to people perceiving you and, uh, you know, mean comments and things like that. And so it was even kind of a personal challenge for me too, to be like, let me put myself out there because, let's see what happens. Like be bold and just put yourself out there. And, that's the only way, again, that try and fail. Like if I put myself out there and no views, nobody likes my videos, like we'll just keep trying. It's been really awesome to connect with so many great people as well, other engineers.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, that was going to be one of my follow-up questions. Have you found those platforms have given you new connections to other engineers who are on those platforms advocating for the same thing with wider audiences? Have you found that kind of network together and collaboration opportunities or shared message?
Yeah. I've actually had a few collaborations with different engineers, as well as we have some group chats going, which is really awesome to kind of support each other because it's not that big of a group of us that are engineer content creators. It's kind of a niche. So you definitely get connected really quickly. And I think even with people in your comments as well, like if I make a video about something in the workplace or some technical concept, I feel like I always learn something from my comment sections because my viewers are also engineering students or engineers. So I feel like I learn a lot from my audience as well as hopefully them learning from me. So it's been a really like awesome experience. And overall, I would say it's very positive. Like those negative comments, of course, are there, but that's just the internet. But I would say overwhelmingly, people are really positive, and yeah, it's been a really great community.
Yeah, great. And it's great that you can learn from other people as well. I mean,
Yeah,
and again, you kind of develop these connections and all learn from each other. And as long as you're coming from it from a very positive mindset of trying to help people, people will try and help back, and it builds positively.
exactly. Yeah.
So do you get a lot of questions from the audience themselves and people who see your content about how they can kind of get into the industry as well?
Yeah, I get so many comments. Comments about how should I study, comments about how do I get a job, general questions about time management. I get questions all the time, and I try to answer them as best as I can. Sometimes I don't even know the answers, and other people in the comment sections will also chime in and help each other, which is really nice to see. So I think that kind of also translates to that community aspect. It's not just me providing advice; it's all my followers to each other are providing useful advice, and it kind of creates this area where people can get support, feel heard, and get answers. So yeah, definitely get lots and lots of questions.
Yeah, which is great because that in itself feeds more content and provides more ideas in the future as well. So the
Exactly.
more people who are getting engaged with the content, the more content there is to create to answer those questions and open those conversations.
Yeah, people always ask me like, how do you just keep coming up with ideas? I'm like, look at my comment section. There's constantly people generating new ideas for me. And also it's important for me to know kind of what they don't know because as a graduated, you might not remember what you didn't know as a first year. So it's really useful when people are submitting those comments because any of those like popular themes, I do try to make a video on to help as many people. Because if you have the question, someone else probably also has that same question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Which leads us quite nicely just to kind of our wrap up question, really, is it's probably something that you've answered many, many times on Instagram and on TikTok. And it's probably a
Mhm.
that comes up in the comments every single time you post something new. What would be your key advice to someone looking to get into the industry?
Yeah, I would say the community aspect. Connect with other people that are in those roles that you're interested in. Universities typically will also always offer those open houses where you can go and learn a bit more about engineering. I really strongly recommend going there because you'll have the opportunity to talk to so many other students and get kind of an idea of what it really means to be in these programs and in these career paths. And talking with people like professors, people are always open to talking. If you reach out and ask for a coffee chat, most people are very happy to go and talk about their day to day. So that's one thing I kind of wish that I did a little bit more when I was in high school is reach out and just learn about what opportunities are out there because you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, if they do have any more questions or they would like to learn more, to follow you on Instagram or TikTok
Yeah, of course.
for the plug.
Yeah, yeah. Aerial views with the ZS because the S was taken. Yeah, follow me on those platforms and feel free to connect with me on there as well.
Brilliant, thank you. So yeah, that's kind of everything that we wanted to cover today. So I just want to say, Madison, thank you very much for joining us on Engineering Pro today.
Thank you for having me. This has been awesome.
This has been Engineering Pro, with me, Matt Nicholson, and our guest, Madison Smith, talking about her experiences of the mechanical engineering industry, how to navigate finding and landing a role, and her tips and advice. If you've enjoyed this episode and would like to learn more, you can follow Madison on TikTok and Instagram at Aerial Views, where she shares her commentary on the industry and some more advice and insights on her journey into her career. You can also follow NES Furcroft by visiting our website, www.nesfurcroft.com, for more information on opportunities available in your region, blogs and videos with more handy advice and insights to help you get into the engineering industry, and register your details with us to find your next big move. Thanks for listening.